Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. 'Twas blind, but now I see. Amen. Going to start a new study this morning. And we've done this study before, several years ago, but it has been quite some time now. We got quite a few new members here and people here, and some of y'all that were here last time we did this, you need a reminder. We all need a reminder. This morning we're going to begin with discerning levels of conflict, just to begin this study to show you and to think about, all the areas this affects. We're thinking about our world, what's going on in our world. Did anyone not get a lesson this morning? Anybody need a lesson for us to hand out? Good deal. If you need one of those lessons, we got people going to be handing those out, please. Good deal. Discerning levels of conflict. Now, when we talk about discerning levels of conflict, we need to go, wait a minute, what's really going on here? What level of conflict is this that's happening as far as this world is concerned? Lots of things are happening in our world today. As you probably saw the news this morning or last few days, there's lots of conflict in our society, in our world. And as Christians, it's easy for us to be drawn up in that and go, oh, wait a minute. It's all going bad and getting worse, everything. Well, it's bad all right, I'll admit that. But it's not any worse than it's been. It's the same thing. But all along with that, we go, what can I do? What can we possibly do to remedy these things? And not just in the world, and not just on our borders, not just as far as D.C. is concerned, but also right within our own homes, in our own families, in our own society, in the church. What kind of things will we do? It concerns me a little bit that our preaching oftentimes is not very practical. Not very practical. By that I mean, you can't hardly take the things we talk about on Sunday and use them on Monday. You go, well, how does this apply for my life? It's interesting, and it's biblical. But oftentimes we're not very practical. Now, I want to begin this lesson with showing you how practical every day that we can use these things in our lives to really get the source of what's going on in our lives and the lives of others. Now, if you're not teaching these things, you don't believe these things. If you're not teaching this, you don't believe it. Because when you really get it, you'll teach it. My professors in college years ago now, they impressed upon me, if you're not preaching this, you're not getting it. If other people are not preaching it, they're not getting it. Here's your thing. This is what's got to happen for changes to happen in our society. Heard a person talk about this morning how much they're looking forward to getting that's outside of our borders. Getting the American dream, having the American dream. It's all about the American dream. I feel so sorry for those people looking for the American dream. The Americans don't have the dream. Americans don't have a clue on how to get the dream. It's all fake. It's not real. It's all bells and whistles, you see. Now, what we're going to talk about this morning is the thing that gives people hope and shows them the answer, the solution, not only for them, but also for us. And not only must we be teaching this, we got to be living this, or else we get bound up in society and the things of society. But we got to begin with discerning the levels of conflict. What's really going on? Now, on your left side of your page there in the corner, it says service problems, visible actions. These are things we're seeing. Now, these are not all the things we're seeing. These are just a small amount of things we're seeing. But we're seeing things like this. Your first thing is wrong clothes. Wrong clothes. Right there on your first line, wrong clothes. If you're not writing that, you're not with us. Wrong clothes. People wear wrong clothes. Wrong clothes. At wrong times. Remember, as a boy growing up in Florida, going to church in Florida, you wouldn't believe the people wore bathing suits and bikinis to church. I'm thinking, wow, I'm not sure Christians. I was in 3rd grade, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure Christians should look like that on the beach. Listen to worship service. Come on. What's this about? Well, trust me, it hadn't gotten any better. It's worse than that now. It's incredible what our brother did. And it's not just in Florida. It's other places as far as it's concerned. Wrong clothing. When people wear the wrong clothing, that's telling you there's outside things that are showing you. Now, all these things we're talking about here are visible things that you can see that are going on. Number 2, flattery. 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 Like wrong clothes, flattery is when somebody's talking to you and all they can tell you about, and everybody else, all about how wonderful you are and great you are and everything you've done and everything. Well, there may be some truth in that. At the same time, when people are flattery, usually the flattery is going on, it's all this bragging about this person is the most wonderful person you could ever meet in your life. There, all these kinds of things. I've literally had people I've had pull them aside, don't tell them nothing else about me. Don't say this no more. They don't need to know these things. Let them figure it out for themselves if these things are true or false. Flattery. When people are into flattery, there's something else going on deeper. Profanity. Profanity is your next one. Profanity is a sign. Now, don't get so upset about profanity. I mean, it's one of those terrible things that's out there. All of us have heard it. I was raised up in construction. My father was a construction worker. I've worked in construction. I mean, construction is like being in the Navy. I mean, it's just all these kinds of things as far as profanity is concerned. But it's not just in construction and in the Navy, and it's all around us all the time. You try to sit and eat in a place, and you listen to the profanity that's going on around you, and people saying things and doing things. You're going, wow. Listen, that's an outside sign. That's not the problem. It's an outside sign there's something deeper going on. Something bad that's going on deeper as far as that's concerned. The next one is dishonesty. 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 We live in a dishonest society, see. And it's not just people cheating on their taxes, and well, that's some of it. And it's not just people saying dishonest things. We just live in a society of people who are trying to see what all they can get by with. Dishonesty. And some of them that are doing it are people it should blow your mind. I tell you, possibly a banker being dishonest? Who ever thought about a banker doing that? I was raised with bankers. I know a lot of things dishonest people do in banking. An investment person being dishonest? Yeah. There's all these people. We're trusting them. We're depending on them. But we're surrounded by dishonesty. They try to find all the ways they can get as far as things are concerned. Disrespect. Dishonesty. 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 People not being honest. Disrespect. Disrespect. Now, I know I got a lot of grandparents in here, parents, grandparents. I think we're dropping the ball. I really think we're dropping the ball. I know we know what respect is. This morning I heard a thing talking about table manners. Table manners. I thought, wow. That took me back. 13 years old, Elk City, Oklahoma. Lived with my grandmother. Thank God for my grandmother. Fabulous, wonderful person in my life. She worshiped right here at Second Adams. That woman taught me manners, table manners. I mean, she was strict living with her. I got a younger brother 2.5 years younger than I am, and older sister 2.5 years older than I am, and all three of us were living with her. Had it not been for her, I'm not sure I'd have any table manners. It's incredible. But table manners, so important. But respect, not just table manners, but also respect, holding the door for somebody. Do you have something?
I heard this morning interviewing a teacher in Tennessee, talking about the disrespect of his classroom.
Yeah.
This past week, he was sprayed with mace by one of his student,
Yeah,
and he's had kids spit on him.
yeah, yeah,
That, it's out of control.
It's-
We've got to do what we can and
yeah,
not hurt.
yeah, exactly. It's unbelievable what's happening in the classroom and all these, but gets back to the thing as far as disrespect is concerned. But this goes to us going, wait a minute, what can we do? We can teach our children, our grandchildren, those around us as far as these things are. But that's showing us things that are visible signs, visible actions that are going on. Debt. Your next one, debt. Debt. Oops. Did I touch something there? Debt. It's unbelievable. Read a thing the other day. The average American on their credit cards owes somewhere in the neighborhood of $7,500. $7,500 on credit cards, not paying anything but the minimum on debt. That's an outside thing. That's not the problem. It's an outside thing showing there's inside stuff going on. A person stays in debt in America. It's unbelievable. People being in debt. It's the thing of the times. How do you get out of it? There's all kinds of ways of getting out of it. But this is visible things as far as showing us how to get out of things. Another one is running away. Running away. Running away physically, running away emotionally, just getting away from things. We live in a nation of runners. Most of our homeless people, don't misunderstand about this. Most of our homeless people are running away. Running away. If you get to talk to them, you get to find out what's going on, you find out they like it. They want to be there. No bills, no thrills, no responsibilities, no anything. They're running away. Oh, we feel sorry and a bad thing as far as, now there's a few that are not, but most of them are running away. It's unbelievable how many runners we have in our country. Geographical cures. Just get someplace else, geographically, for us. Another one is wrong music. Wrong music. Put that on your line. Wrong music. Hard to find a station on the radio that have some kind of ungodly music on there. Wrong music. Listen to these kind of things for our sermon. On the next one, I just put bad habits. Bad habits. On bad habits, out there beside it, you can put addictions. Addictions. We live in an addicted nation. Addictions. People are addicted to pornography, addicted to alcohol, drugs, all kinds of cigarettes. Commercials are full of all kinds of things people are addicted. Addiction is not the thing, you see. That's the visible thing you're seeing that's showing you there's something deeper going on. Something bad that's going on deeper. Unless the deeper stuff's taken care of, the addiction's not going to change, or it can change to something else as far as it's concerned. The other day, I was standing at the grocery store at Hutch's, saw something on the ground. I thought, what is that? I stood there looking at it. I thought, what is that thing? I asked the checker, I said, what is that? She said, that's a vape deal. That's what they vape with. I said, a vape thing? She said, yeah, you suck on that, and it pretends like it's cigarettes, and you vape with it. I said, really? She said, yeah, just leave it there. A guy will be back to pick it up. Okay, well, I stood there for a little bit, and directly a guy walked back in there, picked the thing up, walked off with it. I walked over and said, what was that about? She said, well, they're not going to leave their vaping thing laying there on the floor. They'll come back and find it. I said, boy, howdy. I thought cigarettes were bad enough, and pipes, and all that chewing tobacco. He said, no, now they do things, the vaping stuff, you see. Habits, it's these kind of things are going on, and it continues to be more and more all the time. Addictions, that kind of stuff. Arguments. Your next blank there is arguments. You've been around people that just love to argue. Whatever you talk about. Knew a fellow one time, my next door neighbor, Canton. Whatever you talked about, whatever you brought up, he'd give you the, here's the other deal. Here's the deal. Loved to argue. He never did know it. But I started playing a game with him. He didn't know it. I'd see him out in the backyard, see him someplace. Last time I saw him was here in Elk City. And my game was, I'm going to talk to him till we agree on something. When we agree on something, I walk away. Usually I talk to him 5-10 minutes. Something, everything. He disagreed. And then once in a while, we'd agree a little bit, and I'd walk away. He never did know I was playing a game with him. I'm going to see how long it takes for us to agree on something. Some people just like to argue with you. That's an outside thing telling you there's something deeper inside going on. About religion, about politics, about their dog. So whatever it is, they want to argue with things about things for us. Another one is illness. Illness. Now, don't get us wrong here. Just because see people sick or ill, it don't mean they got. But oftentimes, the outside stuff is Illness. People are ill all the time. I knew a lady, no, she's still alive. Went to see her at the nursing home the other day. I knew a lady that she was either getting the flu, she had the flu, or she's just getting over the flu. For 30 years, she's had the flu. Come on. It's just amazing how people want, and now it's the latest flu, got COVID, oh, I got COVID, People want things. 70%, they figured this out, 70% of the people in the hospital didn't have nothing wrong with them. Nothing wrong with them. Until they came to the hospital and got it diagnosed and everything, they found out there was something wrong. They dreamed up something, then they went to the hospital and, I got this thing wrong with me. That don't mean they're not sick people in the hospital. It just means they decide there's something wrong with them. So much of our illness is decided. That's an outside thing, saying there's something deeper going on. We'll get on that in a little bit. The last one I have here is lying. Lying. That's not telling a fib once in a while. That's ongoing, continual lying, not telling the truth. These people will not tell the truth they'll tell a lie when the truth will fit better. Kind of thing. Just to tell you something is going. Here's the deal. Continual lie. Well, that's telling you something deeper is going on. Now, these are all visible things. Like I said, don't get wrong. Don't miss this. This is just a small list of them. There's many more things. The way people cut their bodies, poke holes in their bodies, color their bodies, all these kinds. That's telling you the outside things are showing you there's inside things going on, you see. Don't be fooled by it. That's not the problem. There's deeper stuff going on. That gets us to our second list. Surface causes. Okay, what's causing the outside things are these surface causes. These are attitudes. Attitudes. Now notice these attitudes. When you learn how to see people's outside things, and you go, okay, now let's go deeper. But what's their attitudes? What's really going on with them far certain? Number one, inferiority. Inferiority. A lot of people just feel inferior to everyone else. I deal with a lot of young people. I have through the years. A major thing, where I start with working with young people who are struggling, is with inferiority, you see. Do you see fear in that? Inferiority, you see. They're afraid. They're afraid. Because they feel like everybody's better than they are. Everybody's stronger than they are. Everybody's smarter than they are. They're missing out. They're not good enough, you see. Inferiority. It's plaguing our young people. So many of our young people are having such struggles in school, in relationships, in life, with their bodies, all kinds of ways, because they feel so inferior. They feel inferior physically, mentally, socially, financially. You see, all these ways they just feel like they can't be. And you see a lot of those grow up to be adults who feel inferiority as far as certain. Anger. Next one's anger. People with anger issues. I know somebody in here right now sitting there getting, I know about that. I'm getting mad just thinking about it. Went to Minnesota several years ago on a mission trip. Had a guy that's a professional wrestler with us out of Tulsa. I was sitting on the bus with him. Nobody on the bus but me and him. And he is up there. He's the bus driver. He said, I've got a terrible pain in my back. I said, you have? I'm sorry about that. I've had back issues. I know what that's like. He said, yeah. And I said, but I've just recently found out that if you have pains on the front of your body, your stomach and stuff, that's anxiety and that's worry, causes front thing. And back things are caused by anger. Takes it out of your back. There's actually a guy that's done a study on this. It's a back surgeon. He puts people through a clinic thing and helps them deal with their anger, and usually they don't have to have the surgery. It's amazing how this works. This guy said, you know what? I bet that's true. I'm getting mad you talking about it. People are just angry all the time. You see, that's the inside attitude. Get over it. Deal with it. God said, here's what you do to overcome. Fear and worry. Your next one is fear and worry. We live in a fearful world. People are worried about everything. What about the future? What about the past? What about my money? What about my investments? What about the church? What about communism? What about, worried? Fear and worry. How much time do you spend with fear and worry? Ooh, that's really good. Fearful people are easily controlled. There's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that. You bet. Fearful. Many people are fearful. Rebellion's your next one. Rebellion. Rebellion. I don't sense that so much here as I did growing up, but I was raised in the South. The South's going to rise again. Not really. But rebellion, you know. The mascot for our high school was, we were the West Morgan Rebels. We're going to rebel. We're going to show you how it's going to be this time. We might have lost that last one. We're going to win this kind of thing, you know. Rebellion. Built into us, this thing of, you rebel, you see. Well, that's not godly. That's not the Bible. But that's a lot of people's lives. You just go against the norm. You go against the forces, rebellion. Envy and jealousy. The next is envy and jealousy. It's amazing how many people in our society are envious and jealous of other people. They're jealous because of their money. They're jealous because of their looks. They're envious because their dog looks better than theirs. They've got all the kinds of things that they're envious and jealous about, deep down inside. A lot of people are envious and jealous. Another one I find interesting is boredom. Boredom. When people are bored, that's the inside attitude. There's inside attitude. Insecurity. Insecurity. We live in a world of insecure people. Very insecure. It's amazing how many people you come in contact with daily. They're very insecure. They're insecure about their life, about their family, about their income, about their work, about their insecurity. It's amazing how many insecure people are. Another inside attitude is guilt. Guilt. So many people struggle with guilt. They've done things wrong. They continue to feel guilty about it. Another one is frustration. Many people are just frustrated. Why does it have to be this way? Why do people have to treat people like this? And so frustrated with what's happening in society, in life, in the government, in their families. Just frustration. Another one is tension. Tension. A lot of people are just tense. They can't calm down. Can't seem to relax. Can't find peace. They're tense. Another one, and you might need to add another line on your deal there, is lust. Lust. Many people are lustful. Lusting after other people. Now, you can draw your little arrow from your bottom group of things, this group, to the top group. Because these things up here are coming from these things down here, you see. That's the way it works. Now, I know many of you haven't been taught this, and you're confused about this, you don't understand, but this is the way this works, you see. Don't focus so much on the visible, because all the visible is telling you is there's something internal that's going on. It's deeper that's going on, you see. Deep that's going on. And all these things that are going on right here, we've talked about these attitudes, are basically because of three things. Root problems, character. Character. Root problems, character. Number one is bitterness. Bitterness. So many of these things in this things we just mentioned come from bitterness. People are bitter. Down deep bitter. They're bitter because of their childhood. They're bitter because people don't recognize them. They're bitter because they're not respected. They're bitter. They got all this bitterness. It's amazing how many people just feel so bitter. Number two there is temporal values. Temporal values. Temporal values out there beside you can put greed. Greed. So many people are just greedy. Just can't get enough. Can't get their hands on enough. Just got to have more. Always trying to get more. Very greedy. And the third one, a characteristic, is moral impurity. Moral impurity. You know what that is? That's people who are impure morally. They've got wrong morals. They've got wrong values as far as moral things are concerned. Things like that. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
I sometimes call that not having a moral compass.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Not having a moral compass. Not being able to really go, well, what is morally right? And what's the right thing for me to do? Me think, very good. Yeah.
And a lot of that comes from the way people are raised. Because they didn't have godly parents, and they weren't raised in church, and they saw mom and dad doing all manner of these immoral behaviors. And they've done nothing in their life to learn different, learn better. Their compass is completely off.
Yeah, yeah.
Instead of pointing north, it points south.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I think what's good people are just inherently evil and just a bad, horrible person, then the gospel has no power at all.
That's right.
But when you look at it like this, you realize the reasons.
Yeah,
You realize this is why this person's this way.
sure.
It's not because they're evil. It may appear evil,
Uh-huh.
but people aren't inherently evil, horrible creatures.
Oh.
Or we wouldn't be redeemable.
Or little children wouldn't be. I mean, that's just, that's just showing us. And there's lots of reasons for that, Cody. I mean, Hollywood, there's books, there's all kinds of things that lend itself to moral impurity. And these, you can run an arrow from these to the ones up above it. These three things cause these things that cause these things, you see. Now we're getting down to our root. We're going to get into the Bible right here, okay? This is where it's all coming from. Root causes, wrong response to God. This is the root cause of everything you're seeing around you in society, is wrong response to God. People who respond to God properly and the right way, overcome these things, deal with them, are very effective in the way they deal with them, are being begged for help with them. It's amazing, you see. So really, you're the source of the solution, you see, of these things. But we're seeing these things around us all the time. Wrong response to God. Resisting God's grace. Your first line there, you'll put resisting God's grace. People are resisting God's grace. You want to turn your Bible over to Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12. I've said all those things to say this. And it all comes from this. To me, buried over in the book of Hebrews. Chapter 12, verse 15. You want to put those on your notes there. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15. Looking carefully, lest anyone fall short of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up causes trouble, and by this many become defiled. Now right here in the book of Hebrews, and it's not taking anything out of context, he said, here's your answer. Here's your answer for everything. Here's the answer to the bitterness. Here's the answer to the surface causes. Here's the answer to the outside things, you see. But notice how he says this. He says, looking carefully, lest anyone fall short of the grace of God. He says, if you fall short of the grace of God, then what you're going to get is bitterness. Temporal value is going to get mixed up. Moral impurity is going to happen. That brings on all these other things. That brings out in the outside things. So our solution's right here in the Bible. He said, here's your answer to these things, whether it's in your life or in somebody else's life. Now, nothing gets more practical than this in the Bible. This is the most practical thing there is in the Bible. But, don't misunderstand. If you miss this, you pretty well miss it all, you see. The Hebrew writer, here in chapter 12, has gone through all these things to show us, basing everything on the thing that Christ is the one. He's the one we listen to. That's what we return to. That's what is sound as far as concerned. But here, he gets over this far, and he says, looking carefully. Look carefully. When you diligently look, some translations say diligently looking. When you look carefully, lest anyone should fall short of the grace of God. Now, if you're not looking carefully at the grace of God, then you're going to miss it. It's amazing. As we go through these studies, it's amazing how often, I'll give you lots of scriptures on these things, how often the grace of God, grace of God, grace of God. But it's almost so common till people miss it. I'm convinced that today Satan is using this more than any other technique in the church. In the worldwide, all Christians, everybody, as far as Christians trying to live the Christian life, this is where we're missing it at. And because we missed it, we're confused. Because we missed it, we're upset. Because we missed it, we're upset, we're bothered, you see. But when you get it, when you look carefully at the grace of God, then you go, wait a minute. What happens? Look at the next part of this. The grace of God. Lest any root of bitterness spring up and cause you trouble. If you don't look carefully at the grace of God, the natural thing is root of bitterness. We get bitter. We're upset. We're angry because somebody's taking advantage of our deal. Somebody's messed with us, you see. But when we look at the grace of God, we go, no, wait a minute. No place for bitterness, you know. Sometimes I think it'd be great is just across the board, all Christians in the church just go, wait a minute, no more bitterness. We're all going to repent of bitterness. Get rid of all bitterness. No matter what your parents did to you, your grandparents did to you, your ex-husband did to you, your husband did to you, your kids did to you, your banker did to you, all bitterness. Just go, no, not going to hold anything against anybody. Get rid of bitterness. Because when we get rid of bitterness, that's a game changer, you see. Because we get rid of these other things, get rid of these other things. As long as bitterness is there. But also, let's go a little bit further. Hebrews chapter 12. And by this, many become, defiled because of bitterness. Verse 16. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau. Got bitterness, then you got a fornicator. Now, when we think about the temporal values, the moral impurity, that's moral impurity. A fornicator is moral impure, see. That's a person having sex outside of marriage. He says, watch out, because when you miss grace, there's naturally going to be these terrible things that are happening as far as marriage is concerned. That's what's going to happen. Our society is saturated with it. It's unbelievable what's happened with it. Why is it just taking off and so many people doing it, so many marriages breaking up, all these kinds of things happening? It was one out of two. Now it's more than that. It's unbelievable how many people in our society, their relationships ended in divorce as far as that's concerned. Well, it gets back to this. When you deny grace, when you don't see grace, you don't understand, then one of the natural things that happen is bitterness. The second thing is fornication. Moral impurity happens. It's amazing how often it happens. A lot of people don't even realize it. But then the last thing is, yeah.
I think it'd be good to point out for you to say, a lot of times I've come to you and talked to you, and I've been pretty bitter and pretty upset and angry about things. And you obviously can tell that I'm getting bitter. You always tell me the same thing. You always get to, has anyone put you on a cross? And that always puts things in perspective for me. I just thought you might mention that.
Yeah.
I think that's just so good.
That is so super important right there. And that's what grace is. Because when we think about, and what Cody's saying is, so many times our thing is just more than we could carry. We're loaded down with things. And like you said, oftentimes bitterness comes out of that. But we go, wait a minute, this is bad. But bad compared to what? Compared to what? Have you been put on a cross yet? You know, I told you about the situation when Kathy had open heart surgery and went through that day. And it was just a very stressful day. Had to take something out of the car, go out there and take something in the car in the parking lot. And on the way back, I was talking to God. I told him, I said, this is tough. I don't know if she's going to make it or not. Stood out there in that parking lot, and I thought, tough. Tough compared to what? I told him, you know exactly what tough is. This ain't nothing compared to putting a son on a cross. We can do this. We do it. That's grace. God is saying, I put a son on a cross for you, son. You buck it up. You take it. You deal with it. You see. That don't mean things aren't difficult. It just means compared to what? Sometimes we think our thing is the worst of worst. Nobody understands. God's going, no, wait a minute. I understand. It is tough. And grace will get you through this. But you hadn't put a son on a cross yet.
We're attached to this life too much most of the time when that happens. We don't see the big picture
No.
that's coming in the future.
That's right. Hard to see the big picture and realize really what's going on. He said, I got this. You see.
We understand what we sing. I'm just a pilgrim passing through.
Yeah.
And all those songs, I'm looking. Abraham in the chapter before said he looked for a city with foundations whose builder and maker was God.
Yeah.
But he didn't get to see it then, but he knew it was coming.
Coming. That's right.
By
Keeping our
faith
focus on it.
and the grace of God
That's right.
that showed him.
That's right. It's a game changer, people. When you get it, then you go, wait a minute. Things are not like I thought they were. Doesn't mean you don't see things, understand things. You're going, wait a minute. Compared to what? What's going on? But the last thing here, and I don't want to leave this part, in Hebrews chapter 12, it says, lest be a fornicator or an unfeigned person like Esau. Now you remember Esau, that's in Genesis 25, verse 32 and 33. Esau, you remember he coming in, he'd been out hunting, comes in starving to death, and Isaac, his brother, has cooked some stuff. He's a cook, and he does gardening, all kinds of things like that. And he says, I'm starving to death. Give me something to eat. And you remember the story. Almost laugh when you hear it. He says, wait a minute. I'll give you something. Before I'll give you something, I got to get something too, you know. I'm paraphrasing this. And he says, what do you want? He says, give me your birthright. You remember what Esau said? My birthright? You can have my old birthright. Just give me some beans. Give me some food. He sold out his birthright for a mess of pottage, for food. A vain person, that's temporal values get mixed up, you see. When you sell your birthright for a bowl of soup, you see, how many people you know that are doing the same thing today? They're selling out their inheritance for a bowl of soup. Just give me something, I'm starving. I don't know how hungry you've been. I've been pretty hungry in my life a few times. But I've never been hungry enough to say, give me a bowl of soup, I'll give up my birthright for it, you see. He said, if we're not careful, though, you'll do that. Now, when you focus on grace, you go, no, wait a minute. God says, I'll take care of you. Yeah, you're hungry. I understand hungry. But here, don't sell it out for nothing. When we do, our temporal values get mixed up. We're about to run out of time here. Go to James chapter 4. Your next thing there is grace requires humility. Your next line, grace requires humility. James chapter 4, verse 6. You already know that verse, and you probably got it memorized. James chapter 4, verse 6. But God gives more grace. Therefore, he says, I resist the proud, but I give grace to the humble. God gives more grace. Your sheet there says, grace requires humility. Now, to get this grace, we have to humble ourselves. When we humble ourselves, God, I got nothing. It's not about me. It's about you. What do you want? God says, I'll give my grace to you. I'll give my grace to anyone if they'll humble themselves. Humble obedience. Humble obedience. It's amazing what humility does for God. But in that same verse, he says, God resists the what? The proud. I don't want to hear about all you've done, all you've got, all you've been. I've heard of people on their deathbeds, people. But look what I got. I own 6 sections of land. Guy's laying there dying. He did die right after he said that. Bragging about temporal values on his deathbed. God said, I don't want to hear you bragging. I want to see your humility. I want you to humble yourself and realize you got nothing without my grace. But if you got my grace, you got everything that you need. You see, the Christian who gets his eyes off grace, gets all these things right. Inferiority, anger, worry, fear, rebellion, envy, bored, insecurity, guilt, frustration, tension, lust. All these things and more come when we get our eyes off grace. When we focus on grace, we go, no, got no time for that stuff. I mean, look what God is doing. Look at what he's providing. 2 Corinthians 12:9. 2 Corinthians 12:9. Grace is sufficient. On your next line, you want to put grace is sufficient. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this verse because we are in the future. 2 Corinthians 12:9, grace is sufficient. Uh-huh.
Those last three, the root causes.
Uh-huh.
First one, wrong response to God. Second one is resisting God's grace. Correct? What's the third one?
The root cause is wrong response to God, Cody, over there under it, far cern. And then your first one is resistance to God's grace. Grace requires humility, and this one is grace is sufficient. And you'll remember this passage, a very familiar one to us, 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I most gladly will rather boast about my infirmities, for the power of Christ may rest upon me. So here God is saying, I've got you. Paul is talking about the thorn in the flesh. And God says, my grace is sufficient. My grace is sufficient. Now, I wished I had another class period to do this, but I only have this little piece of time right here. You've got to get this. And we'll talk more about this in future days. When you get the point to where anything comes up in your life you're dealing with, you pray about it. And I prayed about it through tears, and you'll pray about it through tears. I don't know about this, what to do about this. But you in that prayer with, but I know this for sure and for certain, your grace is sufficient. When you can tell God, your grace is sufficient, you get it. When you tell other people, I don't know about that. I don't know what's going to happen with you. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this right here. God's grace is sufficient. It'll get you home. It not only will get you home, it'll get you through whatever you're dealing with right now. I don't care how serious it is, what's going on with it, what the struggles are. God's grace is sufficient. Now, two things before we close. If you really believe that God's grace is sufficient, you're telling other people God's grace is sufficient. Our world needs this desperately right now, like it's never needed it before, you see. We live in a world that's struggling. No hope, fear. No wonder the suicide rate's so high. No wonder people have so many addictions. No wonder people are so many divorces. Because they're hopeless and they're helpless. They need us to go, God's grace is sufficient. Here's your answer. I've had to stand toe-to-toe with one of my sons in my barn before. Through tears, he said, Dad, here's what's going on. I listened to him. Took him serious. And I said, okay, son, if you can stand here toe-to-toe with me a year from today and tell me God's grace is not sufficient, I'll believe you. He called me back in less than 6 months. Oh, Dad, God's grace is sufficient. Really? Yeah, look what happened. Who knew? I'm going, there you go. Put it to the test. Like the old gal says on the appliance commercial. Test His grace. Don't test God, but test His grace. God's grace is sufficient. There's not an area of your life or anybody else's life He can't handle it. That now, grace is not just, you got to obey. It's obedient grace. It's accepting, you see. But we're going to go into that deeper, far concerned. But His grace is sufficient. Now, before we close, I want you to ask yourself a question. Has His grace really been sufficient for me in my life, in every area? Physically, financially, socially, spiritually, relationships, or not? Why hasn't it been, you see? Well, don't be too hard on yourself. It's probably because you haven't been taught. This is the way it is. And you probably haven't been modeled for you. See, our children, our grandchildren need this desperately. They need to be able to stand toe-to-toe with us and go, this is what I need. This is what's going on. And hear us say from our lips, God's grace is sufficient. He's got you. He'll take care of you. You obey Him, you follow Him, you stay faithful to Him, you'll have this, you see. You might not have it in this life, but it'll be taken care of. Don't worry about it. Otherwise, you got these other things to deal with, as far as concerned. Yes, sir.
If you've never had to show someone grace time and time and time and have them completely take advantage of it, you'll never receive a wonderful blessing and a wonderful lesson that you get to see, because that is truly how God feels.
That's right.
All of the time.
That's right.
And if we can take an experience like that, though it's hard, to have someone do that, you can take that and put it as part of your faith, then you can grow, and God can use something bad
That's right.
for something very good.
That's right. Exactly. Well said, Cody.
Lord, we sing all sufficient grace for you and me. We sing it all the time.
Yeah.
We know what we're singing.
That's what concerns me. We sing it all the time, but do we really know what we're singing? Yeah. Hopefully it'll mean more to us as we continue study. Thank you for being with us today.